in order to befriend with the sharks. The man fed them his own arm. From that moment on, the sharks remembered the taste of human flesh. They refused to eat anything else. The man had to dig up corpses from the ground to feed them. When there weren't enough bodies, he even captured women and children for them. In the end he sacrificed the entire village. That's why when Dororo and the others arrived, there was no one left alive. As Usagi was anxiously figuring out how to cross the river, the one-armed man approached them. "I have a boat. Where are you headed?" Usagi pointed at the lone mountain ahead. The man instantly understood, but he made it clear that he charged a fee. Usagi didn't care about the price. Instead he was curious about the village. "We were attacked by bandits. They all got slaughtered." Hearing the man's indifferent tone, Dororo felt something was off. But he couldn't stop Usagi's stubbornness, so he had no choice but to board the boat with them. Strangely enough, the boat started moving forward, even though there was no boatman. When Dororo peeked beneath the boat, he was horrified to see 2 massive sharks were pulling it. Everyone panicked in fear. The man affectionately called out their names. "You even named them?" "They are my family. Naming them is only natural." The man considered the savage sharks his family. This made Usagi question his sanity. But the keen-eyed man noticed. Dororo was staring at his missing arm. "Are you curious about my arm? I fed it to Jirumaru and the others." Dororo and Usagi were stunned. They couldn't believe that not only had the man fed his arm to the sharks, but he also casually said, "It's no big deal. I just wanted them to remember the taste of humans, because that's the only kind of meat they eat. So I fed them every living being in the village. All of them." At that moment, Dororo finally realized, it wasn't bandits who destroyed the village. It was this terrifying man. Meanwhile Usagi noticed that the boat was drifting farther from their destination. He immediately drew his sword demanding the man turn back. But with just a whistle, the man made the massive sharks stop. Then he loudly called out to them, "Sorry to keep you waiting. Here's your freshest meal. Enjoy it to the fullest." Amidst piercing screams, the sharks capsized another boat, throwing its passengers into the sea. One by one, they were devoured. Usagi tried to fight back, but a shark lunged at him, biting his arm. The man leapt onto a shark's back, and swiftly escaped. The other shark stayed behind watching them. Usagi tried to grab a wooden plank to row away, but the shark gave him a fierce warning. Usagi knew the man wouldn't let them go, but they had no better plan. Then Dororo had an idea. Recalling how the shark attacked Usagi, he decided to dive into the water as bait. Before jumping in, he told Usagi, "When I give the signal, pull the rope as hard as you can. This way the shark will leap out of the water." "We did it, we killed it." With Dororo's plan, they finally defeated the monstrous shark. They dismantled the boat's planks to use as oars, dragging the dead shark to shore with them. By the time the man returned, Subaromaru, the one-armed man, was devastated to see his shark dead. But he didn't realize this was all a trap. Usagi had lured him in for revenge. After beating the one-armed man half to death, Usagi ordered his men to throw him aside. Then turning around, he demanded Dororo hand over the remaining half of the treasure map. Dororo thought of the half tattoo on his mother's back, and remembered the monk's grave warnings. "The thing on your back is a powerful force that can change the world." Because of this, Dororo firmly refused Usagi's demand. But his defiance instantly enraged Usagi. He grabbed Dororo roughly, stripping off his clothes. But to their shock, Dororo, whom they always thought was a boy, was actually a girl. Usagi was confused. Why did her father raise her as a boy? Then he saw the secret map tattooed on her back. Dororo instinctively tried to cover it, but she was outnumbered, and so Usagi finally obtained the full treasure map. After tying Dororo to a tree, he led his men on their treasure hunt. But unbeknownst to them, the man they had discarded was awakened by another shark. He gently stroked the wounds on Subarumaru's body, tears streaming down his face. He swore vengeance against Usagi and his men. He would avenge Subarumaru. At that moment Jirumaru responded to his call. The massive shark crawled toward Subarumaru's body. Then in one bite, it swallowed him whole. In an instant, Subarumaru's body underwent a monstrous transformation. It shifted from an aquatic creature to a land beast. Then it set its sights on Dororo. But before it could strike, a powerful force blocked its deadly attack. It was Hyakkimaru, however, with the one-armed man's crazed shouts. The mutated shark went berserk. It engaged Hyakkimaru, who was already battered and wounded, in a brutal life-or-death battle. But in the end good triumphed over evil. After a fierce and desperate fight, the monstrous shark was slain by Hyakkimaru. That beast was a demon from Hell Hall. By slaying Jirumaru, Hyakkimaru reclaimed his humanity. The man, blinded by his lust for a woman, was pinned against the rock altar. The next second, the sword in the Buddha's hand slowly began to turn. It sliced the man's face clean off. As his skin fell into the waterfall, the faceless Buddha took on his appearance. But before long, the face disappeared, returning to its faceless form. The furious woman realized that the face she had chosen wasn't suitable. Disappointed, she pushed the man's body into the waterfall. Then she swore to herself, "I will find the perfect face for the Buddha." But to her surprise, Dororo and Hyakkimaru had unknowingly taken shelter in her home. The moment she saw Hyakkimaru, she knew his face was the one she had been searching for. She warmly welcomed them, cooking a meal. Her kindness touched Dororo, who began to see her as his late mother. But after they finished their meal, Dororo and Hyakkimaru quickly fell into a deep sleep. She had drugged the porridge. Her goal was to steal Hyakkimaru's face. As for why Dororo mistook her for his mother, it was due to the demonic power she had gained from the Buddha statue. The woman was once a sculptor of Buddhist statues. Her statues were known for their serene expressions. But as the samurai era began, people abandoned peaceful deities and worshipped the fierce warlike Fudo Myoo. Gradually she was forgotten. Desperate to reclaim her fame, she began carving Fudo Myoo onto the rocks beneath the waterfall. She swore to create an unparalleled masterpiece. But no matter how she sculpted, she was never satisfied with its face. So she sculpted and destroyed over and over. Even in old age she never carved a perfect face. After her death, a demon took possession of her unfinished statue. To fulfill her dying wish, the demon resurrected her. She was ordered to bring live humans to the cave and offer their faces to Fudo Myoo. Looking at Dororo's youthful face, she ultimately decided to take Hyakkimaru instead. But to her surprise, Dororo was not fully unconscious. He followed her all the way to the cave, even if it meant dying. He refused to let her lay a single finger on Hyakkimaru. Fortunately, Hyakkimaru woke up in time. He drew his blades and slashed at the woman. Against Hyakkimaru's formidable strength, the woman had no choice but to retreat to the Buddha statue. But with just a single breath, the Buddha blew Hyakkimaru to the edge of a cliff. Seeing his resilience, the woman transformed into Hyakkimaru's mother. She hoped to deceive him, but having been abandoned at birth, Hyakkimaru had no memory of his mother's face or voice. With no other choice, she waited for his guard to drop, and swiftly bound him with ropes. Dororo, powerless to fight, clung to the woman, calling her mother again and again. At long last, he awakened her from the demon's control. But just then the Buddha's spinning blade slashed down upon her. Hyakkimaru leapt onto the blade, then shattered the Buddha's face in one strike. As she lay dying, she finally found the face she had been searching for. A young girl knelt in the river washing herself. Unbeknownst to her, a man was watching nearby. Yet she did not get angry. Instead she stopped, and gently asked about his injuries. Hyakkimaru did not answer. The girl reached toward his face. But then she realized, the man before her was blind. She gently took his hand in hers. But in the next moment, Hyakkimaru, weakened by fever, collapsed into her arms. With no other choice, the girl carried him back to an abandoned temple. There she let him rest, showing kindness. She had also taken in many children orphaned by war. Surviving in this chaotic world was already difficult. Besides feeding herself, Mio had to provide for all the children. So every evening at dusk, she would leave to work at the soldiers' camp. On her way she always hummed a gentle melody. She walked slowly through the deep forest, only returning the next morning utterly exhausted. But when she handed the fever medicine to Hyakkimaru, she noticed that he had been staring at her. Mio felt embarrassed, but also confused. It was as if he could see something. Dororo, walking over, explained, Hyakkimaru's eyes can perceive the colors of souls. Hearing this, Mio's heart tensed. She feared that her soul would appear filthy in his eyes. But instead Hyakkimaru gently placed his finger on her lips. He murmured something softly. Dororo immediately understood and told Mio, Hyakkimaru wants to hear you sing. Realizing that her voice could heal his hearing, Mio began to sing the most beautiful song. As they listened completely entranced, the monk returned from scouting the area. He brought both good and bad news. The bad news, war was about to break out. But the good news, he had found a peaceful place safe from battle. However, that land was occupied by a demon god. And this was no ordinary demon. If they failed to kill it in one strike, it would be disastrous. Hearing that a demon god was there, Hyakkimaru, despite his wounds, immediately set out to slay it. Dororo tried to stop him. Seeing his determination, the monk followed. He could not let Hyakkimaru go alone. Watching his silhouette disappear, Mio silently made a vow. She would do her best. She would prepare their new home for their arrival. So she decided that from tonight onward, she would visit both camps. Dororo knew that the enemy camp was full of ruthless men, so he decided to secretly follow Mio to protect her. But what Dororo never expected was that Mio's work at the military camp was selling her own body. The sight before him left Dororo completely frozen in shock. Panicked, he ran away. Mio, however, did not return until dawn, carrying what little food she had earned. But the bruises on her body caught the children's attention. Unable to tell the truth, Mio simply said she had fallen. Upon hearing that Hyakkimaru's leg had been bitten off by a demon, even though she was exhausted, she still took care of him, gently wiping his body. But as she rolled up her sleeves, the large bruises were immediately seen by Dororo. Realizing his reaction, Mio quickly pulled her sleeves back down and continued her work. But Dororo couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. He asked Suzuki, "Have you ever seen what Mio does for work?" Suzuki replied, "I take care of the children and handle chores. Mio earns money to support us. If it weren't for her, we would have starved to death." Dororo finally understood what Mio had sacrificed. When he saw her again, he was able to face her without hesitation. But Mio knew, Dororo had already figured out what she had been doing. Even so, Mio did not feel ashamed of her work. Instead, she was surprised. How does a child like Dororo understand what this work means? Dororo told her, "My mother and I saw many women like you while begging. But even if we starved, my mother never chose that path. My mother was strong, but in the end she starved to death. I think you're strong too, Mio. And I admire you." She was determined to reclaim the lost rice fields. All of them, gaining Dororo's understanding and support. Mio was overjoyed. However, that night, on her way to the military camp, Mio heard an unusual sound. Thinking it was just an animal, she ignored it. She never realized she had already been targeted by the enemy. The next day, a group of samurai followed her back to the temple. They slaughtered everything in sight. Meanwhile, Hyakkimaru was locked in battle with the demon god. By the time he and Dororo returned from the fight, Mio was already lying in a pool of blood. Her frequent travels between enemy camps had made her a suspect, a spy. And for that she was executed. Hyakkimaru gazed at Mio's pure soul. Then he snapped. Like a wild beast, he let out a furious roar. With each strike he mercilessly cut down the samurai. The sight was so terrifying that Dororo froze. At that moment, she remembered what the monk had said before leaving. When he comes out of that cave, don't let him turn into a demon. But now Hyakkimaru was lost in bloodlust. No matter how much Dororo called to him, he couldn't hear her. It wasn't until she held out the rice seeds Mio always carried that Hyakkimaru finally stopped. Looking at Mio's lifeless body, he knelt down and held her tightly in his arms. "Mio,